All right, and we're live. Hey, everybody. My name is David. This is High Shelf Gaming, and tonight we are world building with LegendKeeper. Dun, 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 again. That was we did this during Gen Con, and that was a lot of fun. We did that during Gen Con Online. We had tons of engagement, tons of people asking great questions. We have moderators again tonight, so if you have questions, please just say question, nice big font, and then type out the rest of your question. That helps the moderators find your questions in the chat and get them to us so that we can answer them. Tonight, of course, Braden is our MC. Braden makes Legend Keeper. Braden, dude, welcome so much to the show.
Thank you for having me back. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can do this kind of regularly, like monthly would be pretty awesome.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, this has been we had so much fun last time that I couldn't wait to do it this time all over again, kind of thing. Um, and then next to me is Anto from Icarus Games. Anto, dude, welcome to the show again.
Very happy to be here. Greetings, people of the world.
Yeah, you have a lot of great content on your YouTube channel all about world building, and you use Legend Keeper for a lot of that content, which I really
I do.
appreciate because it gives me inspiration on what to do with my worlds.
So I do. I'm just handing out inspiration die here and there.
Yes, perfect. And then all the way to the right is Patrick with Two Brothers Gaming. Patrick, you have been a member of the HSG community for a long time, and I just love having you on the show every chance I get. So welcome back. You are unique in that you use this for gaming and for like writing books, like real books, not just
Yep.
other stuff. So that is fantastic. And dude, welcome as always to the show.
Hey, glad to be back. It was so much fun last time, so I was excited to re-pick up this topic. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. And so tonight, I've got my Legend Keeper up. These are all the little projects that I have been invited to or I'm running. High Shelf Gaming is doing a lot of games, and so Legend Keeper is really important to that for us. But I don't really, we didn't want to redo what we did 3 or 4 weeks ago. We wanted to like do new stuff. So we have a couple of topics to get us going. Braden, I think I'm going to hand it to you to kind of run the show, and you just tell me what you want me to show, and I will pull it up on screen.
Let's do it. So one of the ways we interact with our worlds, right, is through maps, right? To kind of geographically position ourselves and our characters and our places and our plot hooks, throughout our imaginary worlds, right? So my question to you guys is, one, how do you even start, right, when it comes to mapping? How do you use your maps? Where do you get them? Do you make them yourselves? Like, there's a lot of places we could go with this, right?
Sure.
But yeah, like open discussion on mapping.
Yeah. So I'm gonna open my Cyberpunk game, and I just want to show y'all like David making a map versus David finding a map. Just real quick. So this is David finding a map. I think I got this one from MapQuest. Like little secret, MapQuest maps are actually pretty dang good for game world maps because they don't have a bunch of stupid logos all over them. So I use a MapQuest a lot. That actually came from Katrina. That hot tip came from Katrina in our community. The other one that is good is frankly just Google Earth is good for finding real world city maps. You can get rid of all the logos, all the labels, and just like make that any city you like. Like this is Sacramento, but you wouldn't know it unless I told you, right? Or you
Yeah.
happen to really know where Highway 80 and Highway 5 meet, right? If you're like in Sacramento, you might know that stuff, but anybody else in the world would be like, I don't know, highways, city, got it. So I strongly recommend MapQuest and Google Earth. Those are great places to get maps that have few labels on them. But let me see if I can find.
That kind of leads me to an interesting question.
Oh, yeah.
So if you could just have Earth like as a map that's just sort of available at any time, would you use that, or do you like kind of taking cuts, prime cuts of planet Earth, and sort of transforming them to your wells?
Great question. So there are a lot of Google Earth and Google Map hacks out there that allow you to like add custom labels or do like, I mean, if you wanted to just figure out what would the blast radius for a big nuke be in this city and just make a big circle of like, this is the destruction zone, which
disturbingly common world building question.
Which I have done in a game, right? And it's like, Denver's gone, but this part over here is not gone. So like that kind of stuff, I have used a lot of the tools out there, and I like just grabbing the screenshot and using that. But I don't know, like I had never really considered even the idea of having like, I don't know, you just bring Google Earth in here. Like that is, there's an attraction to that of like, I can start them in a city block and say, this is our game.
Yeah.
And then as their power grows, I don't have to change anything in LegendKeeper. I just zoom out the boundaries or just tell everybody, hey, zoom out to the whole city. And then like that could be an effective way to, you know, change the scale of the game. But that would be really cool.
Yeah, there's kind of an interesting worlds within worlds sort of thing here, because, you know, when we're world building, we're making a microcosm of the real world, right? And so LegendKeeper is actually built on tools that were really meant to be used in the real world. And I have actually modified them to allow for fantastical parameters. So when we upload our own maps that aren't bound to reality, we're actually kind of working against the tooling. And I have done stuff to correct that and like make it easier to do. And so it's funny, just doing the real world is actually really easy on my end of things. So it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Neat. Okay, so here's my example of David makes a map, which is horrible. This is like Roll20. You know, they have a little freehand tool, and I made like a coastline and a road, and this was our game map for all of chapter 1. And I was like, that's fine, because like Night City isn't really a city. Like there's not a Google Earth of Night City. There's now really beautiful maps because of Cyberpunk 2077 coming out. There's gorgeous maps that I have seeded into my LegendKeeper now. But this is the OG map for my game of like circles and lines connecting those circles and maybe a label if I felt real froggy. And so like this is me, right? Like I am not good at making maps. I know there are wonderful tools out there. I just don't avail myself of them. I instead use real world maps, you know, because most of my games are like modern day or near future, and I'm kind of basing everything off of like that ethos. So I never really got into making fantasy maps, and I know there's a lot of people out there that are like probably screaming in chat like, use Wonderdraft or use whatever. It's like, yes, those are great tools. I never learned them because all my stuff is modern or future.
In its most simple form, though, that right there is a perfect map. All it needs to do is show the relation of different things, and everything else is just window dressing.
I love it.
If the players know what direction something is in relation to where they are, the map works. The map works as well as any map would work, and everything else is just pretty.
That's you know, thank you. I love that. I used to start games where the players got something no better than a napkin with a hand-drawn map, and I was like, this is what your character knows about their world.
Yeah.
And then as the game progressed, they were like, David, where's the new map? I was like, that's y'all's job.
Yeah.
I don't like making maps. As you can tell, I don't put a lot of effort into it. So please, maybe the two of you have better map making tools than I do. I would love to hear them.
I mean, I've handed my players a piece of paper with the jankiest hand-drawn things that you can imagine and been like, right, this is the fortress that you're going to be besieging for this evening, and it's just a really oblong hexagon with some circles around it, and that worked fine. You know, we just put it in the middle of the table on a tiny piece of paper, and it did the job just as well as a huge, beautiful map would have done from a purely practical standpoint. Maybe not as nice to look at, but knowing where things are.
Chat just dropped about a link for Night City, and a Divanaut dude, I've seen your map. I really like it. So yeah, I will maybe bring it into this a little bit.
This is super cool.
Yeah,
that's
this
pretty.
this is a really nice cross promo. I'm into it.
Yeah, on the topic of like
Oh yeah,
kind of interacting with your players,
stealing that over there. Yeah. Sorry,
I
keep
was
going.
once in a
I'm trying.
I was once in a D&D game where the DM actually at the beginning of the game was like, obviously they had all of their prepared stuff, but at the same time they handed each of us like a map fragment and we're like, draw whatever you want on this.
Mhm.
And when we came back the next session, we actually, the DM found places for our fragment to live in like the
That's
entire
cool.
world context, which I thought was a really cool way to engage player, get some investment from players into the world building, right? Because I think,
Yeah.
especially in the context of like D&D or RPGs, right? I think that a lot of the times D&D campaigns exist because the DM needed a way to express themselves, and the players are kind of along for the ride, right?
That yes, that can happen.
I think that's a fairly common scenario.
Yeah.
And so doing something like that I thought was super cool because it's like, oh, you know, now we can kind of world build, you know, collaboratively together. Not just, you know, oh, you make a character sheet, right? And my character has a backstory.
Sure.
It's you make a character sheet and a map fragment and, you know, make a dynasty, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, anytime a player can contribute to the lore and the world building of a world, I think the world ends up better for it.
Yeah. So that has been a big thing for me. Let me get back to Sacramento real quick just to show y'all. Oops, Sacramento. So okay. So we're playing in Sacramento right now in my game, and like we needed a truck stop, and so like we invented this truck stop, and one of my players is a legit like no bullshit trucker, and like goes and grabs photos of stuff for me. Is like, David, do you want like a creepy railway bridge? Yes, I want that. Okay, cool. Here's a cool picture. Do you want a gas station that doesn't mention any gas companies? Yes, I want exactly that photo because I don't want my game to have, you know, real brands in them, right? So he found me this Roy's gasoline motel cafe thing, and then we like came up with this concept of Chexican, like Czech and Mexican food fusion. And so now we have this huge like menu. Oh, whoops, I didn't save it. Oh yeah, here we go. We've got this huge menu of like Czech Mexican food that like we all came up with and the chat came up with and all this stuff. So like this right now is by far our favorite place in the game because it's what the players came up with and it's what the group came up with, and it's like Sacramento is like now Sideshow.
Yeah.
Like we want Roy's.
Why wouldn't you want to stop at Roy's for some goulash nachos?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so to me, it's like maps they come in two different flavors, and I think adding to this, so you know, I'm not a cartographer or a very good map. You know, if I try to draw a map, it's pretty terrible. So I like to use some generated stuff. So I don't know, David, if you've got my link to my, it's called Eternum Bellum world.
Yeah.
So I built this map using Wonderdraft, which builds it sort of, you know, procedurally, allows me to change some things. And what I did was, you know, I named some places, right? But I didn't want to define everything, right? Because to me, part of what you guys said about world building is really important, that the players interact with it. So, and this is one that I've used in a couple of games, and my brother and I play this one. He runs a group of basically monster hunters. So that goes out, and we decide, hey, you know what, we're going to go visit a place today. And I put it on the map at that point in time, and we define stuff as we're working in it. So you can see, like, if you go up to the left, where you see Nuvio Donum, scroll down a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like, we made that up on the fly, Ventum Isonorum. This is a kind of a Roman themed D&D setting. and I just put some stuff in there. You can see I don't have a lot, but
Sure.
and then I use that to generate cities.
What is that? I've seen that.
Yes, that is. I will pop that one into the Wonder Draft. That is
Watabu.
Yes, thank you, Anto. Yes, that's exactly. I use that thing like mad.
Say that again.
Watabu, I believe it's pronounced. It is a procedurally generated fantasy city map maker. God, that's a mouthful.
So
and I will put that into the chat.
Yeah, please do. Please do. Because that, like, again, I hate making maps. So anything that's like procedural generation, I can just like click the redo it a couple of times. Like, that's what I need. That's me. That's my speed. So that is greatness.
Yeah, and it has all sorts of options. So like that one, you can build walls, you cannot have walls, you can leave labels, you cannot have the labels, you can change all sorts of things very simply. And I love that thing because it's like, oh yeah, here, I need it. So pop it in, and then I can attach it to that kind of city. So and it's big, small, with rivers, coastlines. It's great. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a surprisingly flexible tool. I've used a lot of those maps from Watabu in my game, and for some of the bigger cities, I'll pull them into Wonder Draft and then fancy them up. But the base map of it is just that procedurally generated thing.
I think, did I see a video of yours where you used Watabu and then you like loaded that in Photoshop or Illustrator and then like blended it into your Wonder Draft creation?
Yeah, so you can take the Watabu map, scrub out the background so it's just the buildings, and then import that into Wonder Draft as a placeable asset, so you can just plonk it down on the landform that you've made.
That's brilliant.
Super cool.
That is brilliant. I love that. That way, like if your Wonder Draft creation is sufficiently like zoomed in, that a building would get mention. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's really good. I love that. I love that.
How often do you guys find yourself with like narrative decisions being like influenced in surprising ways by geographical decisions, right? Like let's say I generate a city with Watabu, something, I don't know how to pronounce it, and just the placement of the buildings, right, starts like getting my gears turning. Like, does that happen for you guys often?
Yeah, I will, like, when I look at a map of a town, there's always a handful of things I really want to see. And, like, understanding where the prison is in relation to the rest of the town sometimes has an influence on me. Or, like, if there's an area that's obviously, like, the bar district, then, like, that's my crime spot. That's where all my crime families are, is in the bar area, right? And then, like, all of their influence emanates from there. And so, you know, that's just kind of my take on it. And I know that's like not great to bars. If there's any bar owners listening, like, I don't think you're all crooks, but like in my games, like that's where I want the crime elements to be, is in like seedy bar areas. So very sorry if you yourself are a tavern owner. Nothing but respect to you. But that's where I'm at. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I've been working on my Night City cyberpunk campaign, and I actually use a version of that same map that we saw earlier. And I definitely place things, and I have formulated stories around what the features of the map are. You know, oh wait, that's Kabuki, and there's a bunch of buildings in there that have some kind of interesting shapes. I wonder what those are. Ooh, that's probably a big building. Oh, there's a river there. How many dead bodies are going to end up in that river floating out to the Pacific Ocean?
Sure. You know, I have character creation influence my maps quite a bit. Because when my players are making characters, I always want to know where they're from. Right? And then I asked them, well, what did your character do before they became an adventurer or an edge runner or, you know, shadow runner, whatever the thing is that they are. And they will, you know, on the fly make up some stuff. And in my head, it's like, well, that needs to exist now, right? Like that roller derby rink needs a place in the Upper East Side of Night City. Or they were a goblin hunter. All right, well, there's goblins now. outside of that town. You know,
Yeah.
like that just immediately says, okay, just through character creation, I am adding stuff into the map that my players invented because they wanted their character to have experience with that. And like that immediately influences the map, and then we come back to it later when it's like, oh yeah, you know, you're back at your hometown, and over there is, you know, where the Goblin roller derby rink is, and you know, there's people placing bets on it or whatever the thing was, you know.
I have a big world map that I have, and I've sent it to my players and basically said, here is the region we're playing in. Your character can be from this region if you want. If you want to be from somewhere else, here are the places I have information from. Otherwise, pick somewhere and you get to make a country. And whatever you want that country to be and whatever you want that place to be, we'll run with it. It exists now. And you can define that little pocket of the world on over there whilst we're playing over here. And then whatever they've defined is persistent from campaign to campaign. So the stuff that characters might have made for their backstory in my last campaign, those regions still exist in my current campaign.
That's cool. That's really
cool. So prior to COVID shutting everything down, I had a session 0 right before the night of the NBA walking out, starting actually with a group in a game store with this. And I actually took a PowerPoint presentation that I had built based off of this, saying, okay, so here's what the kingdom of Anto, and I'd grabbed a whole bunch of images that I thought were representative of the different kind of kingdoms and empires, and I kind of went, you know, kind of through them, but was kind of did the same thing. And it was like, but we're going to define this together. You know, I'm not, you know, yeah, this is kind of my conception of what the Darien Empire is, but you know, it's got some Persian influences. It's kind of bad, you know, it's the opponent to the, you know, kind of Roman kind of themed one. So, but a lot of that was inspired by the map itself, and just kind of putting it together and saying, wait, what's this big mountain range here that kind of came up? You know, I wonder what that's going to be. Oh yeah, that creates some barriers. Oh wait, hey, the dwarves live here. So, sure. you know, and that kind of function. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really do like. I love how much you do collaborative world building, like on a much larger scale. Both of you doing a much larger scale collaborative world build than I do. Like I'll let my players come up with a gas station, and y'all are letting them come up with whole countries. Like that's amazing to me. I absolutely love it.
In terms of player engagement, chances are, as a group, your players have probably engaged more with that gas station because it's there. Sure. It's very in front of them versus one player saying, right, I've made some information for this country, but that's half a world away. We're not playing there. So it's only really that one player that has any attachment to that versus all the players who have an attachment to Roy.
That is actually something that I try really hard to do in my games, is make it so that if a player has something that can be brought into the game, it's brought into the game kind of as fast as possible. I have run into the problem in the past where someone will make something that is cool and gets mentioned on the map, but it doesn't come up. And then like 10 sessions in, they're like, hey, can I bring in this thing? And it's like, we're away from there now. Like, I can't bring in your, you know, lover that's back in the mountains of Darien, the Darien Empire. You know, I can't bring them in because we're out of the Darien Empire now. Unless they like stalked you and found you, I can bring them in that way. But yeah, so like I have like in my own GM canon rules about how fast player background really needs to come in, especially if it's documented. If it's documented on a map or like in a place that the other characters have access to, I need that to get into the game so that everybody else gets to play with it. Right? Yeah. If they don't ever get to play with it, then it's like,
yeah,
you know, like that's less that's less juicy for me. Like I want them to experience that, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, so the Cyberpunk campaign that I'm getting set up to run here include the two main characters are PIs, right? So
I
decided
access to your Cyberpunk game, don't
I? You do. It's Night City Nights, yeah. So
Let me refresh real quick.
Yeah. So, but that that's weird.
Maybe you
Did you delete my project?
Maybe
Oh,
I
no.
did.
Gone.
It might be a permissions thing. Permissions are still kind of
Yeah.
wonky.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, but but my point is going to be you've got Night City, right, and you're trying to figure out how to do the you're doing the Roy's thing, and I've decided kind of where their office is at, but I'm giving them basically, what does your office look like? Here is I've started using Dungeon Fog to create my own sort of battle maps, I guess, for a lack of a better term, something very specific. And so I've started building this kind of floor. And I say, okay, here's your office. What's in it? Whose office is there? And trying to give them an opportunity. Now they haven't decided yet because I haven't seen them the final map, but that will be the intention of. I've told them this, and so they'll be able to define that, what it looks like, and kind of have an investment in it, which I think actually, even Mike Pondsmith in the apartment scenario he sets up is like, hey, let them put in furniture, let them kind of invest themselves within this space that is theirs, because then it becomes meaningful to them and it attaches to them. So,
Right.
Yeah.
What is it? Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the apartment scenario he wrote up, it's exactly that. Like, let them decide what the aesthetic is in their own apartment, so that it's like not just some apartments. Like, no, this is mine. I care about it. I spent 5 minutes describing the furniture. I will defend it to my last breath. Like, that is, I'm invested now. Yeah, absolutely. I also have. I don't think I have access to it right now. But there is one of my players is putting together a really interesting game where instead of a map, it's a picture of an office. And there are pins on like the globe in the office and the desk and the thing. And it's almost like, did any of y'all ever play the old like Mac game Myst?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Where you walk up and it's
sounds like a point and click adventure.
Totally, yeah, exactly. It's like it's a beautiful picture of an office, and there are little things sprinkled around the office. It's like, these are points of interest that you can interact with and discover more about within the LegendKeeper map of the room.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and
that's very clever.
I immediately had the sense of like, oh god, I'm like 12 years old playing Myst, way in over my head. No concept of what, because like when that game came out, I was way too young to be playing it, and I was just not any good. But like it's kind of gorgeous and really sets a different tone, a different mood than like I have a top-down tactical map of the place. Like, no, I'm in the room, and this is what I see ahead of me.
Cool.
It's really
I like that a lot.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and kind of with upcoming, there's a lot of stuff we want to do for the Atlas, but one of the things we really want to do is being able to draw regions, right? And that's kind of another unexpected side effect, which is like you could totally do like a point and click style adventure like that, like with these regions where when you mouse over the suitcase, it gets highlighted, right? So
yeah,
you're like
I love
almost
that.
building like this video game like experience for this like collaborative storytelling, which is pretty funny.
The idea of like regions or territories or just boxes of any kind. Yes, because absolutely. As soon as I have, like on my world, where various gangs or tribes, the nomad tribes in Cyberpunk, where they roam matters. But then, like the idea that I could say, okay, here's the office map or whatever it is. Y'all want to go over here? Click, and then now second floor shows up. Or they click in this and now they're in the office. And there's the like fire chief there, eating a sandwich, doing something on his computer, right? And then they're like, okay, what do I do, right? And so that'd be kind of a cool way to help my players explore a building. I really like that idea.
Yeah, that's super cool.
One of the things I'm really excited about is layers in the Atlas, and I think we actually talked about this last stream, so I won't go like too crazy into it. But just imagine like Photoshop layers, right? But just being able to, kind of at the level of detail that you would like, being like, all right, this is the layer, that's the biomes, and I'm gonna talk about biomes in my world in this layer and highlight these regions, and the rainforest biome, highlighted and it lights up, and then going like, okay, and then like these nomad tribes roam in these regions, and then and being able to kind of selectively hide and show these layers to kind of build up this really rich layered experience.
Oh
That's
yeah.
something that I'm really
Oh,
excited
like
for.
even like,
Gangs in Night City.
are you kind of like talking about like swapping out layers? Like you can get the gang view, and
Yes.
then the like the
view.
power broker view, and then the like pollution view, or whatever it is that'd be.
My ideal version of this feature, and obviously they start simple and then we iterate and they get better and better and better, right?
Yeah.
Is exactly that. Like I'm trying to imagine like a good example. But yeah, just imagine being able to save certain tags and geographical features as like a view or a preset, right? And being able to do exactly that. Like, I want to see this world's climate. I want to see this world's gang activity. And these are all, regions that you can define yourself.
Yeah,
Are you
there's a lot of
imagining-
love for this in the chat, by the way. Like,
Are you imagining that they can overlap and you could view the biomes and the gang region on top of the map at the same time?
I'm thinking it would work like layers in maybe a simplified version of layers in like a painting application. So you could turn them both on at the same time.
Mhm.
That may be kind of a visually confusing experience, but kind of giving that control to you, right? So where you can say, you could go really, and there was a question that I think is really good, which this can kind of bleed into that. You could be like, oh, this gang is located in this high heat region, and this is the region where this particular resource is not available, and come up with all of these like
story
really
reasons.
granular story
Mhm.
reasons to like motivate characters, right? But that kind of leads me to a really interesting question in chat, which is it possible to world build too much for a game?
Oh,
Which I think
God.
is a fantastic question.
Yes.
It depends on what you mean by too much.
I've clearly always erred on the side of too little, so I'm not the right person to answer that. Because for me, it's like when I get distracted or find something else I want to do with my time, that is when I've gotten to the too much marker. Because for me, like, this is a for fun thing, right? To world build, so I will build until, I don't know, my research leads me down some weird rabbit hole, and then I just don't get back to world building because I've been doing research on this thing that has lit up my brain for a while. And so that seems to be kind of my norm. But yeah, I guess I should stop there. When I say that's how I find too much world building, is just my own interest.
How do you find it, Patrick, especially with the context of writing books?
Yeah.
That gives a very different perspective from just the game world building.
Yeah, I kind of divide it up into two kind of spaces. So there's the personal joy and fulfillment and love I get with world building, which I can just go as deep and as long as I want, and it's personally satisfying, and I just enjoy it. And if I never use any other part of it, it's no skin off my nose, right? So I invested the time. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with it, and you do hear stories like Frank Herbert had, far more pages of notes about his Dune universe and world than he did actually put on paper. And those novels are thick, right? So,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them. So I tend to go pretty deep, but I do iterate. I do refine and adjust as I'm engaged in the writing process, and as it sparks ideas. So I try not to let it trap me, which I think is the risk of too much world building. You become too invested and trapped within something, and you can't kind of like step back and pull back.
Yeah, somebody says, "Hey, I need a pawn shop." He's like, "You can't have one. This is a school zone."
Yeah,
and it's like,
no.
Well, why is it a school zone? Well, because I made that happen 5 months ago when nobody was in this town.
Yeah, exactly. From a gaming perspective, and I'm curious to kind of hear what your thoughts on this. I think it's possible to go too far in world building if you're expecting players to engage with everything that you do. If that's your expectation, then you will go too far and you will be disappointed.
That is 100%. If I make a bunch of stuff and the players never go there, I am upset. Like, I have totally taken stuff and just moved it in front of them so that they will play with the thing that I built. But like, that is sometimes a GM fiat, GM unfairness, right? So like, if I go through, when I go to like make a world for my game, I really am focusing on, this is where the players are, and I need to have, like in a video game where there's like a boundary thing, like I need to go just far enough that they can see the horizon, but I'm not going to go any further. But that's me, because I'm so focused on like, where is my game? And if the players say, we're going to go to Dallas, I'm like, okay, fine. Let's throw all this out. Let me design Dallas. Let me start all over.
So the approach that I take, especially in my current campaign, because it is a true sandbox where I've made it very clear to the players, you can go literally anywhere you want at any time and I will never stop you. For me, there's functionally no such thing as too much world building, because I find it easier to run my game if I know the world, and excessive world building helps me know the world. The players might never go to a specific place and learn anything about it, but they might come into contact with someone that is related to that or has some contextual information about it. And me knowing it allows me to improvise much quicker because I understand the boundaries of the world, which means that in terms of session by session prep, I actually do very little these days. I have sort of broad strokes and then a lot of world knowledge to back it up, and then I just let them go.
That's a really good point. That is a really good point, that like having a lot of that context really helps make your world feel more vibrant. Like I will borrow from media, like movies and TV and books I've read and all that kind of stuff, and I will just throw scenes into the game so that there's more world context outside of, this is your quest today, or this is your mission. Like, I need them to know that there's more going on around them than just the mission that they're on, right? And I do all of that through, I guess it is world building. It's through like me just bringing things and plopping them around them to make the world bigger than they are. You know? But that's a really good point. Like, that context is needed.
Like more data for your personal world simulation that you yourself are running, you know, in your head, right?
That's a good point. So yeah, like when I say I design an area, I know a lot about that area. But if you go like out of town, I don't know anything about it. I really don't. I know it's bad.
I'm by nature a completionist. If I get into a game, I tend to buy all the books. Not even if I'm not going, like I hardly run prepared adventures, yet I have tons of them because I read them and use them, but I never run them. And so I very much am like, I think I'm like you, Anto. I'm just like, I want to know the world so I can respond very quickly to it. I think that there's those two parts. One, you don't lock yourself into something if the players come up and do something that you don't expect, because they never do that, right? So you allow yourself freedom, but if you've developed enough, and you don't mind that, maybe they aren't going to visit it or something like that, but it helps you improv those actions when they run into it. Or wait, I'm going to have you run into a halfling from this part of the world, and these are their particular kind of cultural characteristics that they bring to it, and
exactly,
they're open and generous. You're just able to go with the flow really, really well.
So you guys are reminding me that like there are modules out there. Like, I think a lot of games when they get started, they look at a module because like, hey, here's a whole adventure. You don't have to come up with a bunch of stuff, right? And anybody who's like into world building is like, I would never use a module, and I hear you. I don't use them either, but I do rip off modules all the time.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, good. So you get into this mode when you're reading the module, and you're like, here's the 2-page description of this character. It's like, oh man, this character's going to come up a lot. They came up in one scene.
Yeah.
And it's like 2 pages of like cultural notes for one character, and they're in one stupid scene. And then I'm like, but if that character shows up a lot, or there's more people from that region, that is really valuable, right?
Yeah.
And so like the lesson of know all that stuff before you start seeding NPCs in from that area, 100% valuable, right? 100% valuable of like, you give so much context to who that person is. And that's good. Like, to go back to my Roy's example, like the gas station owner, I know exactly who that guy is because I know the culture he's from and all that kind of stuff. And that's because over the game, we have been poking at that culture. We've been poking at that group a little bit. So we've been defining it. And then now they have a business representative of that group, which are like, they are villainous and they are terrible people. But Roy is A-okay because he's a business guy. But he represents some horrible people. So like, that stuff is fun. That stuff is a fun dichotomy, right? And I get that because we spent time world building that group in the game, right? But like, there's other groups that we have not even mentioned in the game, and there's no world building done there yet. And it's like, I kind of know who they are, but they're not going to get any more context until we start playing with it. And that's just how I world build,
There's some really interesting congruency here with other creative pursuits. For example, so I used to be really into making electronic music, and I still am. I just don't have time anymore. But there's kind of 2 phases to it. One is composition, which you can kind of imagine, which that is, actually creating a song.
Sure.
But then there's also sound design, which I think at an abstract level, there is composition in the more abstract, and then there's honing your toolkit, like creating your own tools. And so when you're in sound design mode as a musician, you're sampling instruments, you're making cool synthesizers, you are building the fundamental elements that you are going to weave into your composition. But a cool sound is not a song, and no one wants to listen to just a cool sound by itself, blaring out into the void. It is when it is weaved into a cohesive narrative that kind of imbues meaning upon that fundamental piece, that this world becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And this kind of dichotomy between composition and the building your fundamentals, building out your toolkit, I think this pattern is everywhere, and world building especially. I think world building is the toolkit. But like games and writing, right? Like,
that's the song.
Is the song, exactly. Yeah. And so I kind of think of it from like a top-down or a bottom-up perspective. Like top-down, you are writing a narrative, and the things that your narrative touches, you fill out as the narrative touches them. They come into being. But then there's bottom-up, right, where you create these elements and you start dotting them around and you weave the story through them.
That's beautiful. Like, I love that example because. Have we all not been in a game where the whole game premise and everything is really this one cool sound?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you figured out and you're like, wait, is that all this is like one thing? We've been spending 4 hours for the one thing. We've all been there. Maybe run a couple of those games. I might have. But yeah, that's totally right. It's like the idea that you need a tapestry, you need a collection of good things and weaving them together. I really like that example, Braden. Thank you.
Yeah, there's an electronic musician. His name is Il Gates, and he recommends to musicians that they don't work on those 2 things at the same time. That they keep them completely separate, different parts of the day, different days of the week. Like when you want to sit down and hone your tools, hone your your characters and geographies and all that stuff.
I feel
now
like
I'm directly bringing the music metaphor into world building now, but
no,
like
it's good. I think that like when you get on Masterclass YouTube channel and people are paying you for the whatever, have you seen the ads for the Masterclass thing
Yes,
where you learn how
yes.
to play? Yeah, like when you do that, you're gonna be like, all right, so when you make music and be like, wait, I'm here for world building. It's like, yes, stay with me, stay with me.
the thing we all discover is everything is a subset of world building
Yes.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you sit and you only work on honing like the perfect sound, the perfect mountain that influences the climate of the town nearby, which causes different crops to grow, which causes different professions to like keep that's good, but keep that in a box and like don't let it get in the way of telling a good story. Let it fuel a good story, but don't let it control box up a good story.
I have a region of my world that I built as part of a series of videos where I did just that. I started from the very foundation, plate tectonics, all the really technical, gritty things, and I didn't worry about anything to do with story until that was done. And then I looked at it and went, what story is there? What has been made by the things that I have done that has been completely divorced of any notion I had of what this might have been? I've just gone in it and used the tools on it, and now I'm looking at the finished results and have to decide what it all means.
Yeah. So there's a question that I think that we got in the thing that I think ties back to something that I do in this. So what the question is from Di Carvo: how far back should the world local history go?
Oh yeah, it's a great question.
So in my novel, before I started writing the cyberpunk novel, which I'm in the process of doing, I started a brief history of the United States from 2019 to 2065 to win that. And I actually started writing a history of the United States of all the things. And that actually informed where some of the story was like, okay, wait, yeah, we have massive flooding. Hence, I have most of Florida underwater. And what happened to that, and where did those go? And so I it's almost like a playbook in the back of my head. But that's where I started, and I do think that's the that's the toolkit that I kind of was framing. And I got the map, by the way, from science National Climate Science site that said, "Hey, this is what's going to happen in Miami," and
that's
the
cool.
worst consideration, the worst mathematical models we have. But but that was what happens, and I have a history of what happens to Miami and other coastal cities, and and it's pretty cyberpunk in the typical kind of fashion, but it helped me ground kind of what's happening in this world. And then when I went to start writing the novel, then my investigator Samira, what is her experience within this setting as she engages that prehistory that I've had? So I have a lot of prehistory in my world building and more.
Yeah, I would say my answer to that question would be go back to the last calamity.
Yeah.
Right. Go back to the last thing that screwed everything up. Because like, think about like D&D, especially original D&D, was very much like the world has gone through an apocalypse, and we are just now rediscovering what magic is. Like if you go and look at original D&D, it was you're going into the wilderness where there aren't civilizations, and you're using this newfangled thing, magic, and you are playing with fire that you have no idea how it's going to work out. Now in like 5th edition, like there are whole societies and all that kind of stuff. But I go back to the last epoch, and the way that I make my games is I will start off with some secret. There's some like power, or there's some thing that's happening that nobody understands in the beginning of the game. And I kind of do a top down. I decide, okay, here's this ball of awesomeness. And there are people in the world who are aware of that ball of awesomeness, and they have harnessed it to some fragmental degree, and they are, gaining power from that. So that's my big power brokers, right? And then down from there are the like sub power brokers and subcommittees or sub communities that that, you know, feed them and are protected by them, and they war with their peers and all that kind of stuff. And then I get down to my players. And this all comes from, frankly, from anime. Like, if I'm honest with you guys, watching a lot of anime, like Full Metal Alchemist and the Red Mist. It's like this thing that's around. You don't really hear a lot about it until the very end. You're like, oh my god, it's the whole thing is about the Red Mist. And then, or like Neon Genesis, all about the AT field. It's like, oh my god, the whole thing is like we're separating ourselves from each other because we all have oh my god. So, like, that stuff gives me a lot of like oomph. Like, I love that stuff. So my games have secrets in them, and those secrets shape everything. And then, like, the players are starting way down at the bottom.
Yeah.
And one of them, or maybe the whole group, some of them have access to the power, whatever the thing is, right? And, like, as they stumble along, they learn who else can use fractional bits of it, who all has the power over it. And as they go, hopefully, eventually they learn how to understand it, master it, what have you. And the whole game is about this, like, epic discovery of the great power that was introduced when the last epoch ended, or whatever the last thing was. So this is kind of like just the way I put together my stuff generally. And so I guess to answer the history, to kind of bookend this, history is what is like contextually relevant in your game, likely whatever the last big calamity was to now is what is going to impact them the most. If you have some like really cool artifacts or really cool things that come from like millennia ago, by all means have that context. But you don't have to have like a novel about it. You can have a blurb.
Definitely.
You know,
like,
yeah.
The way I have approached it in the past, I've done it two ways. I've done it what for me is the wrong way and going really in depth for far too long in the past. We're talking 1,000+ years, far too much detail to ever be relevant. Versus now, I get more and more vague the further away from the present day it goes. So, present day, plenty of information. The further away it gets, the more like a myth any information anyone has about anything becomes. Because certainly in D&D, and I think it's true in all editions, almost every D&D world is built on the foundation of multiple apocalypse. There's all these dungeons and tombs and things beneath the earth that once served another purpose,
right?
But they're in such quantity that they must have been widespread. There must have been a civilization there before that the players keep interacting with.
Yeah.
But the further back it goes, the more vague I want it to be.
And that has a nice harmony with how the real world works, right? And what are all of our worlds, but, you know, subworlds within this, you know, in reality.
I pulled up Traveler because Traveler is very much the same thing. There's whole ancient society. They're all gone now. And like there's this humans we're just colonizing the galaxy and just like running face first into ancient's tech. When watching it turn our friends inside out or whatever, and saying, well, that's cool, I should use that on my enemies somehow, right? It's like, I don't understand this thing, but I know it turns people inside out, so that is my new doomsday weapon. But yeah, you're right, like we do exactly that. Like there's these deep dark catacombs under ancient cities that are unmapped now, right? Like they used to be used. They used to be in common usage in cities, and now we have forgotten about them, and they are terrifying.
Yeah. There used to be all of these rooms in dungeons used to be a functional place. Things used to happen here, and now, because of the corrosion of time, they are just bare and lifeless. So it's easy to assume that terrible things caused that the world to change and to make a place where now those places that presumably once were on the surface are now underground, and now it's the present day adventurers that are delving into these places that once would have been something else.
So we go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, one cool thing you can do as you're like making those things, making those dungeons or making those places, if you have that time's like history in your head when you're making the thing, that makes the dungeon really interesting,
Yeah.
because then it's contextual to the time that it was made. And then I would argue the next step is to talk about who took over that dungeon and what
Yes.
they did to it afterwards, because then there's this layer where the players explore and they see new paintings of new gods, tapestries for current stuff, but behind that are like stone relief etchings of ancient
Yeah.
gods and
If
ancient
you-
power structures and all that kind of stuff.
If you click over onto my Ashk project,
Yeah, sure
I
thing.
can give you an example of the kind of thing that I do. So if you go into the Atlas and over to not the Atlas, the wiki, sorry.
Yeah, the wiki.
Over into the wiki and then up into the calendar, top right, the little calendar icon of the
Yep, you got it.
that's the budget. So I have ages of the world, and that's how I categorize everything. I have big chunks of time, and I name them all, and everything that happened fits somewhere in there.
That's
So
awesome.
that gives me context to know how old is something, what's likely to have made it, and how did it come about.
Perfect. I was just thinking like, all right, how much has Anto done in his old ages? And Age of the Gods, single sentence.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's it.
Short and evocative. That's all it needs to be, is that this is far enough back that now we're talking about gods, which means that no one can say for any level of certainty that any of these things actually happened. But
Sure.
that gives an indication of sort of the time frame that we're on.
Sure.
Whereas going up to the more recent ages, there are still records, physical records of things that have happened, or people that might still be alive that know what happened. Ah, yes, that's the thing that blew up one of my continents.
I'm just exploring your world now, bro.
So my players blew up the region that they were playing in with the synchrony device, because they were very specific in a wording when they called in a favor from the god of tricks, and he dropped it right in the material plane and blew up the country they were in.
Beautiful.
Good times.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so, Anto or simpatico, because mine in mine you see almost like it's a very an age of something or other with some description that leads up to something. I completely endorse and I like
Vecna.
the farther back you are, the mistier and the more vague you can be. That's just great.
And like, so I think that if we go back to the question that got us on this whole thing, like how far back should your world history go? There is obviously value in going all the way back.
Yeah.
Right? There's obviously value in going all the way back. But don't spend forever on that.
No.
What matters is, like let's say somebody found a cube from the Age of the Gods. Okay, all we need to know is that was when Sophos made his children. So like that cube is going to have a lot of power, because what's going to make it from then to now is something incredibly powerful. And it might have something to do with like the birthing of a god or whatever.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly the level of detail that I want and would suggest for going back that much. You only need the briefest level of detail to just spark your inspiration for things from those regions and from those time and places.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing is true for pantheons, just as an aside, folks. Like the gods that are currently active in a world, detail those. The gods that have been lost or are underground, until they come up, you don't need a lot of detail on them, but you can definitely have a blurb that talks about how horrible they are or mischievous they are or whatever, and just use that. And I'm kind of diving over to that just because I know that when you start looking at timelines, a lot of times you are also really looking at religious structures and other power structures, and it's totally fair to like have blurbs on all the ones you concoct, but detail for the ones that are going to come up.
Yeah, and even for if you have a pantheon of gods in your present day, you only need a sentence or two for each of them until the players start interacting with elements from them, and the players say, I want to be a cleric of this god. Then you go, right, I take those 2 sentences I've written and expand it out.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Diva Not, for liking my laugh. I appreciate you. So I do want to get into real quick on Oracle has a great question about timelines. What do you all use to build out your timelines?
In the broad sense, that page that you're looking at. So the big timeline, it's just keeping track of the biggest events that happen in there.
So just in LegendKeeper, you made a category for calendar, and then you just list out articles and sub-articles, and that's it.
And that's it. And then for the current day minute timekeeping for the players, I just have a table and do day by day as they're going through their adventures.
Neat.
But for the big world stuff, just categories with vague dates on them if the dates are appropriate. The dates often aren't appropriate. Like if you click on the page that says Ages of the World, I think it will have it. I've got big blocks.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. The huge spans of time that everything fit in. And as it gets closer and closer to the current age, the dates get more and more specific.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, that makes perfect sense.
I for like the calendar kind of feature, I actually use dungeon.bin.sh, which actually has a calendar making feature, and it allowed me to like put in like moons and give them phases and cycles and crank out
what is that dungeon dot
DONJON,
like Don John.
Yeah, Don John.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, dot bin.
JON.
Oh, my apologies.
There you go. You have it popped up there on the.
Oh, bam! Thank you, Google.
This site has tons of great tools.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I've been here. I've been to this site. Okay, cool. I'm gonna toss this into the chat links. Cool.
Yeah, but so it had, because my world had, my D&D world has 2 moons, and basically there's only like most of the time it's twilight, and only very rarely are both of them in new moon status where it gets totally dark and everything freaks out during the total darkness time.
Yeah.
So that calendar, I was able to like build it out, and like you can like click years, come back, and you can kind of save the little code and pop it in and see stuff. But that's what I use to sort of the month by month particular calendar.
So a lot of my stuff is so modern or future. I'm just cribbing our own calendar. And when I get into like this kind of stuff, I will do much the same thing. I'll say like ancient history, modern history, and I really only have like 1 or 2 buckets, 3 buckets maybe. And then when I get into the actual player time, I track each individual day. I find that if I'm not tracking each day that the players experience, it's too easy to lose track of the big picture. Because if they say, all right, we're going to go from here to here, and I don't say that took 3 days, then it's real easy for me to kind of lose track of like, well, how far along have the bad guys progressed? Because they've had 3 days of extra work while the players were in transit. And then 3 days again when they come back, or whatever that thing is. So tracking actual player movement is a day-by-day thing. And I have a single page where I just say, April 22nd, and a little blurb about where the characters were. And I will link to, like in my Cyberpunk game, all of my characters under story. We track each month, and then each of our episodes gets its own marker. But on the DM side, I have the day that episode 20 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I can go and look at all the players that were involved and their write-ups and all that kind of stuff. And this gives me a really firm sense of, I have had this much time for, say, Ember, who's a NPC in my game. She's had this much time to, improve her situation since the players have left Night City. And so, like, that kind of stuff matters to me, just so I kind of know what everybody else in the world has to work with. When the players come back, I need to represent 20 days worth of change.
Yeah.
You know, they haven't been static that whole time. Something has happened. They get back and there's an addition on the house or whatever. And so like I have to know like each day that the player characters lived through so that everything else makes sense in my timelines.
That's exactly how I handle it as well for the player action day by day.
Yeah.
So I don't have a hands-on answer here, just because, like I said last stream, I spend more time building world building tools than I do world building. But I always like to kind of stay abreast of cool new things. And one of the tools I found is called Causality. And I believe it is intended for like screenwriting, but it is a timeline-based writing software. And I do think I'm pretty sure it's free.
Oh.
But it is like all about just arranging narrative chronologically. And it seems really cool, and it's really clean and very effective. And you can set up like dependencies, very lightweight dependencies, to make sure that like stuff doesn't happen before it, before it makes sense. So anyone interested in timeline-based tools, definitely check out Causality. It's neat.
That's cool. Could you maybe snag a link?
Yes, let me do that. And we do actually have a couple questions.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I will read off this. We have Eric Laz is asking a question. And let's see here. If I can ask Braden a question. How much work goes into some of these projects? Have you considered a marketplace? Users could prepare worlds, campaigns, and sell copies of them. Granted, there are sometimes intellectual property considerations and yada, yada, yada. You as a market manager would want to be mindful of, but what are your thoughts on that front?
Totes. So I can't say a ton on this right now.
But there's something.
But we are very much excited about what you are talking about.
Okay.
We are putting together what will be the first version of that, like right now. Because I totally agree. Being able, so we talked about a toolkit before, right? So imagine being able to tap into the collective toolkit of, LegendKeeper world building enthusiasts, right? So like I make a collection of articles that's all about, topic XYZ, or I'm an artist and I create images of weapons or, landscape matte paintings. Being able to bundle that up and share it with people easily would be really, really neat.
Yes.
And I agree.
Oh, real quick, there was a comment in chat about timeline, a program or a feature that would actually assist with timelines. You have teased out a couple of times the notion of having timelines and that sort of thing. Can you do like a quick blurb on your thoughts there in terms of LegendKeeper helping people track timelines beyond the approaches that we have concocted for ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the core pillars of LegendKeeper will be timeline. And I kind of imagine LegendKeeper as these four big pieces, which is the Atlas and the Wiki, which both exist already. Relationship management, being able to visualize the social dimension of your world, or the kind of the semantic, like ontological sort of dimension of your world, not necessarily just social relationships, but organizations, ownership, where people were born, a knowledge graph, right? It's essentially a knowledge graph. And then time, or the chronological, the time dimension.
Right.
And so we don't have it fully spec'd out yet. I've prototyped it a little bit. But yeah, just imagine being able to look in an article, or maybe a piece of an article, or a tab within an article, and saying, here are some important dates associated with this. Here are the labels for those dates. And then being able to go to a timeline view and seeing that all laid out in front of you. That's kind of the big idea. And so ideally you would be able to, just like you can create things from the Atlas view, and obviously you can create things from the Wiki view, I want people to be able to create things from the timeline view as well. So if you are a very time-oriented person, you could theoretically use LegendKeeper just from the timeline, or just from the relationship map, or just from the atlas, right?
That's cool.
That's the goal, at least. But yeah, we want to build, I mean, the coolest timeline feature. That's the goal. So
I endorse that.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
absolutely the best goal.
Yeah, and of course you said my favorite thing, of course, is like relationship maps, because that's my bread and butter, is like is like tracking how various organizations or people within an organization feel about one another, so that when my players run into them, it's not a monolithic front. Like there's obviously some kind of soup cooking in there, and they just gotta like poke it to find the ingredients, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't often, and I'm still not. I don't often give ETAs, but or even short-term roadmap stuff, just because software development in general, is a crazy beast that changes constantly. But loose order-wise, you will probably see enhanced sharing / marketplace / community first. That's since we're working on it now. Then relationship management, followed by timeline. And so we actually did a vote on kind of all of these features. And timeline is by far like one of the most requested things. And so I'm super excited to build it. But if you look at everything from like a user value versus like level of effort for me, the relationship graph is a no-brainer, because there's a lot, they're fairly easy to build, versus timeline. Like every piece of timeline software out there is engineered to like barring, some like fantasy oriented ones, all of the existing tooling is there hard coded to the real world for obvious reasons.
Sure,
right. And so there's not a lot of prior art for me to work off of when it comes to custom kind of stuff. And so that's just harder to build. Whereas a knowledge graph is just a knowledge graph. And so like, if I find a good solution for that, that's a good solution. So which is why timeline will probably come later than these other things.
Sure. But still exciting. That's all good stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
And when it's ready, we will use it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. So I do want to do a quick time check. Last time we did this at Gen Con, I think we had given ourselves like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Tonight we are going to end at a little bit before 30 minutes after the hour. We've got a couple of folks that need a jet, but we have about, say, 10 minutes more. I don't want to go the full 15. I want to let us like have some time to wind down a little bit and, plug our stuff and all that kind of stuff. But do we have maybe 10 more minutes of maybe another topic we wanted to dive into?
Yeah, sure. So we actually, I think we missed one question.
Oh, okay.
This is a good one too. How much do you let your players build the world versus how much do you build the world? So how do you strike a balance when it comes to collaborative world building?
Yeah, I want to answer that one last.
I'll go first. So I assume that none of my players will want to input into the world, because in my experience, a lot of the players are hesitant to they can feel put on the spot if you say, tell me about an area, create something in this world. It makes some players feel put on the spot. So the way I approach it is, I will build the whole world, but I will change absolutely anything that I need to accommodate something that a player brings to me that isn't utterly ridiculous, but within reason. If it's a good idea, if the player brings me something, I will move literal mountains in the world to accommodate it, to empower them getting to put their stamp on the world. But I never assume that they're going to do that, because in my experience, only a few players ever have that desire to want to have input in the world building. They're just there to experience the world.
Yeah, I actually have an answer for this one too. Succinctly, whatever balance you damn well want, with the caveat that everyone at the table or virtual tabletop have the same expectations and you've agreed on it, right?
Yeah.
I think you can do whatever you want in that context, right? So if you are like the ultimate dictator DM and you're like, this is my world, patent pending. It has these different elements. That's fine as long as your players are like, hell yeah, we're in it. Go nuts, dude or lady. Versus you come to the table and you're like, hey guys, like, do you guys want to collaboratively build a world? Like, I think either one works. It just depends on what your folks want to do.
Yeah. Well, so in my novels, no one contributes to it but me, really. But
you don't have like a team of ghostwriters.
Yeah. But at the game table, I think it's I think in general, I am always prepared, like Anto, to have the world for them. And I think typically players will define the world on smaller scale basis when, those kind of direct interactions that they're doing. So I remain flexible in that regard. And obviously you do see things, it's much more common now with narrative dice systems, where, but again, I think those are, I tend to think of those as micro narrative world building instances, right? Because, like I run my Star Wars campaign that I've been running, somebody spends a destiny point to say, oh yeah, I know that NPC there. That's micro. That allows them to do it. But if they want to add more to it, I do that. And Dave, like you, I think I really leverage off of their backstories that they've created. Right. Like, I've got, the Star Wars characters that they really invested time, like, oh yeah. And I think I said it was like a survey, like, tell me the most important thing to your character. Why do they get up in the morning? Who's the most important person? And I take those and weave those into the world to ensure that they are interacting and having those moments where their characters grow, change, and are challenged.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that individual players will address that in very different ways. Like I remember one of the worst games I ever played. And I learned a lot of lessons from my failures. One of the worst games I ever played was Fate. And like that could be surprising because Fate, the dice system, the fudge dice system and the Fate system is phenomenal. It is a really fun time. I love playing it. But session 0 in Fate is you all as a table sit down and make a world. Well, like people kind of hate making worlds. All of us in this chat love it, obviously.
Yeah.
But like there are people out there that like they'll come up with an idea and then somebody does like a little twist to it and all of a sudden the idea is ruined for them because someone else tweaked it in some way. Yeah. And like world building can be frustrating as a collaboration. And the Fate rulebook says first thing is you all sit down and design your world together. What are the aspects of your world and all this stuff? And I'm like, that was the hardest game for us to play. And it was because world building was foisted upon people and we didn't really know it going in. That it was going to start as a world building exercise, as a collaborative world building exercise. And so like, it really depends on the person. Yeah. And then I think that, you were both talking about the players who say, I want to do a thing. And that as a GM is like, yes, please do the thing. And I will, but hand it to me and allow me to find exactly how it fits into the world. Right. Because a lot of times, like I have played with players who will world build, but it's really to like give them a huge list of advantages to then wreck your plot. Right. And it's like, no. You need, no, it needs to be contextual so that like, it doesn't ruin everything when we agree to this thing that you as a player have spent time making. And I love that, but it needs to fit in a balanced way into the world.
A lot of it comes down to individual players and knowing your players. Like one of my players in the last campaign said, I want to become a god. And because I know that player and that being ultra powerful isn't what's important to him, the story is, I was like, awesome. Let's figure out how your character would go about becoming a god. And eventually by the end of the campaign, they were the dragon goddess of time.
Awesome.
So that's, and now they just exist in my pantheon forever.
Yeah.
But
heck yeah. Like that's good. That's good. But the
For
player
other
who says I want to start as the dragon goddess of time,
Exactly.
and I
Yeah.
want to be in this tavern drinking a beer, where anybody who starts crap, they just wonk into nothingness. Like, no, no, that's not it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would recommend anyone who is into tabletop, role playing or role playing in general. When the apocalypse is over and we can come out of our bunkers, take a improv class at a local improv group or community college. I think it is the most like mind-opening tool, one of the most mind-opening tools for your storytelling, because it's you are very immersed in this kind of say yes moment. And like, I don't know if you've ever watched The Office, where there's an episode where they do an improv and I forget the name. I'm not a big Office fan. I'm sorry. The main character, he's always like pulling out a gun in the improv, and like the gun is like that is a violation of like improv etiquette, right? Just like saying, oh, by the way, in the first minute, I'm a god and I exploded everyone in this tavern. That's pulling out a gun in the improv. It doesn't. It takes power away from others, right? Rather than collaboratively building the story.
Yes. Okay. So I think that's the deal, is that like when a player wants to do something that is not expressly for their character's immediate power advantage, but is instead providing interesting context that everybody gets to play with, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm 100% in on that creation. Yeah.
And honestly, if the players at your table have a lot of that pent up energy, maybe spend it on like a B-side session, right? Like a Christmas special episode, like a dream sequence. Like we have done a side session where it was kind of like a dreamlike sort of sequence, and the kind of the house rule just for that session was, if you roll a 20 against me, I will bend reality to make whatever you said happen.
Yes.
And so the players ended up, they were stuck in a smooth copper bowl, but Beautiful. They rolled a 20 to climb the smooth copper bowl. So and so it just melted beneath their fingers as they crawled up. And so it actually ends up being very dreamlike, which makes it appropriate for a dream sequence.
Sure, yeah.
Obviously, like everyone's invested in the idea to the start. Don't draw a dream sequence on them at the end. Be like, oh, but it was all a dream.
It's like, oh, that's not payout. Yeah.
But just maybe something to get that kind of out of everyone's system, like the silliness, right?
Totally. And I love chat's contributions here around world building collaboratively. Cypher System does have really good rules for collaborative world building. Frankly, Fate does too. We just weren't good at it, right? And there's a really good world building game out there called Microscope. And what was the other one that we looked at as a crew? Like, we kind of want to play one of these games as a group at some
Kingdoms?
point. Kingdoms, right? Yeah. Microscope and Kingdoms, both great.
by the same creator too.
It's really a collaborative writing exercise, and at the end of it, you get a town or a world or a timeline, right? Yeah. And it's like it does a really good job at structuring it so that everybody feels like they got to contribute, but no one felt like they got railroaded, right? Which is always the problem when you just kind of do it at the table willy-nilly. A lot of times it can feel great, but sometimes it can feel overbearing.
I've put a link to all of those systems in the chat.
Beautiful. Cool. Love it. Oh, okay, we are getting low on time. Any other last-second questions that maybe we didn't touch on? Oh, this one has been answered by Isaac Newton. The chat answered that one. Great job, everybody. Yeah, I think we're good. Shout out to Blades in the Dark. Awesome collaborative world-building game. 100%. We love it. Okay, I think we're caught up on questions, and we should probably work on wrapping it up so that folks with schedules can do their thing. So everybody at home, this has been super fun. I'm going to pass it over to Braden real quick to plug all your stuff, and then we'll just kind of go down the line to talk about like where to find us and how to get involved in our communities, because all of us are doing something. All of us have Discords, right? All of us are on various places. So Braden, why don't you start us off as the man of the hour with the program of the hour?
Totally. So I'm Braden. I created LegendKeeper, which can be found at legendkeeper.com. It is a tool for helping facilitate this creative process that we've been talking about for the last hour and a half. I created it because as a DM, I was frustrated with myself for like not being able to manage and create all the intricate details. And I was like, well, I'm a software engineer. I'll make a software. And I did that. And it turns out that, there seems to be a need for it. And so legendkeeper.com, go check it out. It's constantly growing, constantly improving. It's my full-time job, thankfully. So shout out to everyone on Patreon who supports it. Every day I wake up and I'm like, I can't believe that this is my life. This is awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So real quick, just to kind of go left to right, I'm David. This is High Shelf Gaming. You've been watching our Twitch channel this whole time. We do actual plays on Twitch, and then I also do a podcast, a weekly podcast, which is just now starting to warm its engines up again. I can just now kind of get out from underneath coronavirus and my workload at my real job to do the podcast again. So the podcast will be coming back online. HighShelfGaming.com for all of that. We're on Twitter. We're on Twitch. We're on Discord. There's links for that in the About section. So in Twitch, there's like an About tab, and in there are links to all of our social stuff. But it's all like High Shelf Gaming at whatever the platform is. There's always something there. So find us, join us, like run games with us, join our games. You can run games in our community. We're always looking for that. And if you want to be on stream, like, let's get to know each other, because Patrick has run a game on my channel. A bunch of other people have run games on my channel. Like, to me, I just want to be a community of gamers that game together. And we all happen to have fallen in love with LegendKeeper. And I happen to be in like 15 projects now because of that. So, yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Anto.
Happy to have all of your creativity.
Yes.
I'm Anto, run Icarus Games. I'm on YouTube and Patreon and all the places. My entire shtick is about helping people run their games more easily, be it through organization or world building, making homebrew games, DM tips, all that good stuff. And you can find me anywhere, maybe even in the bushes outside your house, if you're lucky.
Oh, man.
So Patrick Kanouse, I'm half of Two Brothers Gaming with my brother, and we're on Twitch. Drexel Pierce is my handle there. You can go to our page there and follow us. We've just started new, inspired a lot by High Shelf Gaming and Dave and all the work that he's done. And I use also LegendKeeper for my novels. And so if you're interested in that, you can find at Amazon, patrickknouse.com. Shattered Bowl's only 99 cents, so it's dirt cheap if you're interested.
Buy it today.
Yeah. So, but and Twitter and Facebook and all of that. So,
yeah, I like your Facebook group, man. You got a lot of cool content in there for sure. Okay, I would love to do a raid, because last time I think we just ended it, and raids are fun. So I'm looking on here. I was hoping there's a map maker guy who like makes leather maps, but I'm not seeing him active right now. Dang, he does sometimes do stuff on Fridays, but I'm not seeing it right now. Okay, well, I have a friend, Wandering DM, who is currently running a Cyberpunk game. And so I might send you all over to him. If anybody in the chat has an honorable mention, I am open to honorable mentions, but otherwise, I'm going to start typing in the information to send us over to my good buddy, Wandering DM.
Are you going tonight?
Nice.
Yeah.
Good with me.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. This has been super fun.
Yes.
yeah, thank
A
you.
lot of fun.
Yeah. This has been a blasty blast. I freaking love doing this stuff. We got to do this again next month. We will find the time. Yes. We will make this happen. So let me hit the raid button, and we will send you all to Wandering DM. He runs a fantastic Cyberpunk game. Like, I just love this guy's stuff. So by all means, let's give this guy some love.
Yeah.
And get loaded in there. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. We have so many people. 27 people. Smokes. He's gonna be blown away. We're gonna like more than double his number. I love this. All right. I'm sending you all out there. Have a good night, everybody. Have fun and play well.
Thank you.
See you later, folks.